Welcome back, everyone. I would like to welcome you to the last round of show and tell that we have for today. In this session, we will be talking about some stories and learning experiences from projects in a more developed stage or that already have culminated, and they will share with us some impact measurement and action stories that the projects that you just saw can learn from. And I would like to welcome to the floor Hanna. I'm sorry to pronounce your name wrong. Szemzo from the Metropolitan Research Institute at the Open Heritage Project, and also Ruba Saleh from the ICHEC Brussels Management School, who will be talking to us about the CLIC project. Hanna will be talking about open heritage. And last but not least, I also would like to introduce Cristiana Parisi from the Copenhagen Business School, who will be sharing with us about the REFLOW project. So without further ado, I would like to cede the floor to Hanna.
Thank you very much. I'll try to share my screen. That's always a challenge, so I would like to have a bit of patience, but I really, really hope it's going to work. Can you see it now?
Yes, perfectly.
Perfect, thank you. Before starting my presentation, I just wanted to give one comment about the previous session, which I found really, really interesting, and I was really amazing to see all these really detailed evaluation and impact assessment schemes. And the main message, I know, I mean, I was a bit encouraged by what Emmanuel was saying as a goodbye, is that this is something I also try to use in open heritage. And this is, I was very happy to see T-Factor's stories approach and impact, because my impression has been that somehow in the midst of importance of quantitative analysis and great data and things like that, somehow qualitative methods are being pushed to the back. And I'm a sociologist, and as my personal convictions that often short-term changes, processes and values are very hard to capture, very hard to quantify, whereas qualitative analysis, focus groups, self-assessments, and my actual favorite methods, semi-structured interviews, are really, really appropriate to do this. And they also, I think, allow participatory methods much more than often stricter quantitative methods. But this was actually my reflections to previous one. I'm going to talk very briefly about open heritage. Actually, I put a very short presentation together. I think it's absolutely less than 10 minutes, but I'm happy to answer questions later. So this is basically the qualitative evaluation of local impacts. The case of 6 experimental sites, they are labs. I mean, every project has pilots, labs, something, cities, places, because these are very interesting. These are experimental sites, and I look at them as sites where actually impact assessment can be experimented with. Just very few words about open heritage. So it's a project that's still running, but as it was mentioned, it's close to its end. It was supposed to run for 48 months, but it was extended to 52 due to COVID. And the main aim of the project is to work towards the creation of sustainable management models for marginalized areas. This is a very important point. So this is, we have been trying to find areas where normally no money flows in. With the involvement of local stakeholders, the heritage community are assigned, and with the involvement of local bottom-up initiatives, or they're not local bottom-up initiatives. So it's sort of this is a very civic-centered project and very bottom-up centered project. Still, I think there is really room for top-down approaches. Three more things about the project. So open is not by chance in the project's name. So in our approach, communities through participation get to define what their heritage is. This is very interesting, also not also a bit can be a bit problematic, but openness also means that communities are involved in maintaining it. And openness has a third meaning, that we try to be not only inclusive, but also flexible and adaptable. This flexibility has been really, really important for us during the pandemic. So somehow we have been trying to adjust targets and aims. This is very briefly, we work, I mean, there, you know, I'm not going to explain all the layers of the project right now, but we do have 16 observatory cases, which are not pictured here, but what's interesting and where the impact assessment could be interesting are the 6 heritage, cooperative heritage labs, to say. There are 6 sites over Europe that are very different. I mean, what connects them, that they are all either geographically or socially or both marginal, and with the exception of Lisbon, they have all been supported through a bottom-up initiative. And the Lisbon case, we are partnering with the municipality, but they partner with a lot of bottom-up initiatives. So you also see their presence there. Maybe one more interesting thing, which I think will be important when it comes to evaluation, 6 from the 5 labs were running before. I mean, they had been running even before Open Heritage started, with the exception of our lab in Warsaw, in the Prague area of Warsaw. Everything else was existing prior. And I think that's also an important factor, because it's at a certain point, it becomes very hard to evaluate the project's role and contribution if it's a bigger something you're trying to understand. And these are, at the end, I put 6 pictures here. So for you see, some of the areas are urban, some of them are rural, some of them are practically ruins. Actually 2, one in Rome and one in Pomas, which is in Hungary, whereas the others are buildings or neighborhoods, precisely because we wanted to work both on sites and on buildings and building complexes as well, because they necessitate different approaches. Now, regarding the evaluation, which for your, it's basically important for you to know that it's just something that is going to start happening right now. When it comes to project evaluation, of course, there are different things that we need to evaluate on a project level, you know, changes, policy changes, dissemination effects, etc., etc. But now I'm really focusing in the 6 local sites. These are the 4 main questions that are going to guide our work in the evaluation process in the following months. To what extent did we achieve what we want? This is where I want to emphasize that these are experimental sites. We have been doing our best, but I think it's totally possible, and I already know that there are some sites where we met all the objectives and some where we did not. And sometimes I think it was the fault of the labs themselves, and sometimes it was just the circumstances. One of the key lessons that I want to keep here is to just be transparent and be very open about your original goals and what you have achieved. The second question I think is much more interesting is, what did we achieve, where did we achieve more or something unexpected? This precisely, again, because they are experimental size, this is a question that we have been working on quite a lot. It's the effect also partially of the COVID effect, partially other geopolitical influences. For example, the university that runs one of our the lab in Hungary had to move to Vienna, and that really changed a lot of things. So, and actually propelled ahead some of the governance development of the lab. So this is another aspect we want to focus on. The third is, and this is where I'm a bit lost. So this we try to disentangle, but I think this is a crux for all impact assessments: is what is the result of the project and what would have happened anyways. As I told you before, 5 of the 6 labs had been working before the project, and as a result, there were certain processes going on. They had already connections to the, to different authorities, to other bottom-up initiatives, and to the other local level. And we do need to try to understand what would have happened without us, and where was our role. In what way could we push these projects to change? And the last is the COVID effect. I know it's not very nice to say, but COVID did have positive consequences for our labs. It, in a way, changed their trajectories, but also a lot of negative things. But we try to find everything. When it comes to our evaluation strategy, for us, it makes very little sense to compare these labs. Rather, we try to evaluate them within themselves. And then on a project level, we try to generalize a few lessons learned. So I wanted to give this introduction about the use and the importance of the qualitative methods from my perspective. There are, of course, certain KPIs that all the labs had to meet. There are a certain number of people they had to reach out. This is something we have been checking regularly. But this kind of process-based impact assessment, from my perspective, is more possible with the use of qualitative methods. We have been devising 3 different things. One is doing a self-assessment based on a questionnaire. And here comes participation. The questionnaire was created by us at MRI, but we are in the process of sending it out and getting new info. So we regard the finalized evaluation questionnaire as an iterative process. And
Hanna, sorry to interrupt you. If I can ask you to kindly wrap up.
I'm gonna, okay. The second one is we want to have a expert assessment with the help of the advisory board members. This will be both an evaluation and also as it was mentioned beforehand, something where the evaluation influence actual working and actual operation. And the third, we are going to conduct local interviews in more of an anthropological, in one of our labs, the local team is doing an anthropological evaluation. However, for us at MRI to do it, there are language limitations. So we can do a few, but then we would need to rely on our local partners to finalize and define these topics. For this evaluation here, I'm going to stop. So for us, it's very important to have an internal lab governance evaluation, how it has changed. We definitely want to focus on some of the local impact, again, new corporations. We do actually, it's very hard to measure, but there's possible, new social, economic, or very limited environmental consequences. Where we have been very strong and want to focus on is how heritage community and heritage has evolved, understanding of heritage and accessibility to heritage. And sustainability is an issue we want to focus on through the advisory board. And I want to emphasize one last point is that we are asking our lab to provide recommendations to other projects. This is part of the self-assessment. In our view, what they would have done differently. I think that's a very important, that helps, that provides very important information for us, and also I think helps the labs to somehow reassess themselves and evaluate their work so far. I'm going to stop here. I only have one more slide, but I think it's not really important, so I don't want to. That has been from me.
Thank you so much, Hanna, for your input, and it's definitely very interesting. The topics that you raise are definitely great things to think about when we think about the impact frameworks that the projects are developing. To stay on schedule, I would like to cede the floor to Ruba, Saleh, from the CLIC project. And I would kindly ask both Ruba and Cristiana to try to stick to the times as much as possible so that we can wrap up in good time. Ruba, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Alejandra. Hello, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here speaking to brilliant and insightful colleagues. I was honored to be part of the first part and listening to all these wonderful projects. And I would like to join Hanna in her reflection about the importance of the qualitative research and participatory processes. Today I'm representing CLIC, but I'm not the CLIC coordinator, so I will not be discussing the impacts of CLIC as such, also because CLIC was a very complex project, but I will focus only on the part which we coordinated as ESHEC in terms of the circular business model. So CLIC stands for Circular Models Leveraging Investments in Cultural Heritage Adaptive Reuse, and the project developed, tested, and validated innovative circular business financing and governance models to place cultural heritage adaptive reuse at the forefront for the implementation of a European model of circular economy and circular city region centered on the regeneration of cultural and natural capital. We were in 16 partners in the project from 11 countries, and I was referring to the fact that it was very complex because when we started, the concept of adaptive reuse and circular economy was an infant theory at the very start. And as a multidisciplinary consortium, we had to deal with cultural heritage values, with ecological economics, and with social sustainability in order to address such a wide topic. We started in 2016, and we were extremely delighted to see that both policy and practices were evolving and flourishing very quickly in terms of debate, but also practices on the ground in terms of circular adaptive reuse. And as you can see, the renovation wave arrived, for example, in 2020, and a lot of important academic and reports of the international organizations such as ICOMOS and Europa Nostra started thriving on the theme of the connection between heritage and the circular economy. So the main contribution, I believe, of the CLIC project is practically the framework that perceives the circular territorial cluster as regenerative, generative, and symbiotic capacity of the cultural heritage. So practically this framework highlights the crucial role of cultural heritage in transitioning towards circular human-centered adaptive reuse, and it elaborates on the complex value in the circular economy, highlighting the interplay between the intrinsic and instrumental values and their relational interdependencies, or if you wish, the relational values that regenerate connections in a dynamic process. More importantly, it highlights and conceives the role of the social and cultural dimension as key components for the human-centered developments, because it consolidates the cooperative capacity and the financial sustainability of the heritage assets. So in terms of the circular business model contribution, it was an iterative process, and I would like to re-emphasize on Hanna's point that it's very important to keep an iterative process where we can keep testing our models and remodel them according to the changing processes during the implementation. So we started by mapping the current state of the art of the existing cultural capital and its interplay with the urban infrastructures and economic attributes, and at the same time to conduct qualitative questionnaires with local inhabitants, city walks, but also participatory workshops where we mapped their perceptions in regards to this specific cultural capital. And from there, from what the people identified as abandoned or underused cultural assets, we started designing the circular business model for the adaptive reuse of these specific assets. Our main challenge was how to keep in mind for this business model, the historic urban landscape, the human-centered approach, and the ecological paradigm. This is why the mainstream business model was not adequate for this endeavor, because it considers value only on monetary in monetary terms, and it has no perspective in reference to the human-centered approach, and nothing in regards to the environmental aspects as well. This is why we started analyzing lots of sustainable business models, and we found that the flourishing business model, which has a three-profit metric regarding the environmental regeneration, the social benefits, and the economic viability, was more adequate for the CLIC perspective. We also remodeled a little bit the flourishing business model in order to incorporate the historic urban landscape mapping, which we conducted with the community, how it was spatially integrated, what were the existing resources, and what kind of adaptive reuse was possible there. And of course, how the values can be co-preserved, but also co-created. How can we co-create together new values? And more importantly, what was the possible contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals? So I will not speak a lot about the theoretical concept, but we conducted co-design processes, design sprints in our 4 pilots, keeping in mind 4 important keywords, which were, of course, the adaptive reuse of these specific assets, inclusion and positive impacts, desirability, feasibility, desirability, which means if this is desirable to the community, if it's feasible, doable, and its economic viability. So every one of our pilots had a different challenge related to the asset we were working on. I would like to talk you through quickly the challenge which we addressed in Fingersfors in Västra Jutland region in Sweden, where a group of artists from the Not Quiet collective were reflecting on buying an old paper mill. And after 3 days of intensive design sprints, they developed different business models related to new revenue streams of accommodation, retreats, rural innovation center, future remediation, creative industries hub, ecosystem of sustainable business. But of course, this was done in 3 intensive days, so it was not a finalized business model, and we needed to go into an incubation period, which led to defining a core team, which started working on these specific revenue streams, but it was still not enough, working on a 3 months roadmap. We narrowed down again the ambitions, and the teams were capable of defining a framework to buy the mill, and they got a subsidy to start the future remediation project. At the end of the story, they finalized all what they needed to do. I think I'm out of time, right? So
yes, if you can just quickly wrap up.
Yeah. I'll go directly to the takeaways. So after this iterative process, I can share with you that the most important thing in order to be able to evaluate the impact is to listen more and understand more the needs and challenges, and then we can answer if we answered these needs and challenges, so we can consider the project successful. It's very important to co-design with the community tailored processes because they're different from one place to another. And as Vera and all of you highlighted, participatory processes go beyond the lifetime. And this is really why it's important to have a long-term infrastructure, a core team which leads the process afterwards. It's important to leave a safe space for different rhythms and different contributions, also because innovation depends on the open-mindedness, the enabling environment and available resources. And we also noticed that upskilling and capacity building was key. Thank you very much. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Ruba. And without further ado, I would like to cede the floor to Cristiana Parisi.
Thank you. Let me see if I can share my screen. So let me, yes. Can you see me? Can you see the slides?
Yes.
So thank you for this opportunity to present the project I'm leading, which is REFLOW. REFLOW is an innovation action project that started in 2019 and will last in summer this year. And a couple of words about myself. I'm an associate professor in management control at the Copenhagen Business School. And my main research focus is performance management. And this is why my research interests actually are combined with the experience that REFLOW was developing within 6 cities. And I'm also an advocate for qualitative research, as Hanna and Ruba before me in that sense. The idea behind REFLOW is that it wants to create a series of tools that can be used as a model by other cities to support their transition towards circular economy. And REFLOW has 28 partners over 10 European countries. And it has 6 pilot cities that you can also see in the slides here: Berlin, Amsterdam, Milan, Vejle in Denmark, Cluj-Napoca, and Paris. And as you can see on the left-hand side, the idea of REFLOW started from having a social value as a key element, despite the idea of circular economy. The circular economy, in some way, in both in practitioner but also in academic literature, is quite an ambiguous term that needs to be defined when implemented in different elements. And we thought that one of the main critiques is that the lack of the integration of the social value within circular economy. And this is where we started our work with circular and regenerative cities. And within REFLOW, we have a few building blocks that you can see in green, where the first one being business and society, where we measure the performance in a way that I will elaborate on. We focus on a supporting technology, a digital ledger technology for the transition to a circular economy, the material engineering, the environmental side, governance and urban planning as one of our building blocks, and then capacity building and communication that support the creation of a competency profile that would support our cities to within their transition towards circular economy. And each of the cities, as you can see in the illustration, decided from a bottom-up approach the specific focus of their transition. So each of the city focused on a specific material, ranging from plastic in Vejle, for example, to textile in Amsterdam, to energy in various terms in Berlin and Cluj-Napoca, and to food in Milan, and to fair materials regenerated from fairs in Paris. in order to focus, to zoom in the REFLOW framework, and which is at the basis of our impact assessment. The reason why we ended up with this model that can seem quite complex in that sense is that we soon realized that what we thought as a linear process, and in some ways similar to what T-Factor is foreseen for the future, was actually an iterative process that, and in order to measure impact, there was the need to take into consideration the trade-off that happens at different level within the urban context. And for this reason, we started from the multi-level design model, which is with links to the design research that is part of the expertise that we have within REFLOW. We have the Polytechnic of Milan as a university, with the expertise in performance management that we have at Copenhagen Business School, to think in terms of how we could play with this multi-level design model and think about the various dimensions that impact can have. And the REFLOW framework is a supportive model that ideally will enable the agency and participation of all the interesting and relevant stakeholders, from municipalities, small and medium-sized enterprises, citizens organization, and so on. And it's inspired by systemic design, but it's actually a better way to describe the iterative model and our building block in a more dynamic way. And I don't have of course, a lot of time to explain it, but the main elements of it are, starting from the bottom, is the material innovation, where we studied how to optimize material and energy flows. The product and tech innovation is the second level, where prototypes and the digital ledger technology are included in support of the transition. The circular business model innovation, to understand what value, the meaning of value, and how to create value within the project. The socio-technical innovation, balancing the necessary trade-offs, because talking about value, of course, there are transitioning towards circular economy means also having different positive and negative outcomes and trade-offs that needs to be taken into consideration within the calculation. And finally, societal innovation as the ultimate goal that we are actually pursuing. And I would say the way in which REFLOW looked at performance management based on this idea is starting from the theoretical framework that I already presented you, to a theory of change. And I guess the theory of change is a common framework that has already been used in that sense. But for us, the theory of change served two purposes. On the one hand, we used it to capture the ongoing performance assessment, and on the other hand, the impact assessment. In fact, based on our expertise, we decided to distinguish between a set of KPIs that would measure the ongoing performance and the impact that would go long-term, and that would actually allow to capture the long-term performance through, and we decided to use the social return on investment, or the SROI. The social return on investment is, let me go there, is actually a model that is based on the so-called blended value accounting. And usually it's not used within the public sector or within cities, but it's actually starting to be used in that context as well. And I would say that one of the key elements that the SROI allows us to do is, on the one hand, the attribution. So as Hanna said before, there are initiatives that would have taken place even without REFLOW being there. And this methodology allowed us to take that into consideration, and also to think in terms of dead weight, meaning how long, what is the time frame of the expected outcomes? Is it how in terms of years? And with the results of the SROI, the way we implement it and we change it based on the experience of REFLOW, we will be able to measure in monetary term what and to summarize in monetary term all the values that have been translated through financial proxies in that sense. Of course, I would say this has pros and cons in some way, and there are elements that, of course, there is a difficulty in getting information and involving people, but also I would say one of the issues that we could discuss together is also to what extent it's relevant to have the financialization, so to say, of values that are by nature not financial. So to what extent do we want our cities to think in financial terms, and to what extent a financial assessment of intangible values, so to say, would help cities transition towards circular economy, and in that sense, think in more broader terms. And just to close, you can contact us if you're interested, and if you are a researcher, there's also a special issue based on the REFLOW experience on accounting, auditing, and accountability journal, which is a 3-star AJG journal on circular economy within cities. So thank you.
Thank you, Cristiana, and thank you to everyone who their input, of course. As you maybe can see, unfortunately, we overextended with the time, but this is to be expected. Everybody has come in with really valuable, engaging inputs that will definitely feed well into what the 4 projects are developing with their impact frameworks. As I said, we unfortunately do not have time for a Q&A session, but one of our follow-up tools for this event is we will be launching a contact form for those who want to keep in touch so that we can continue this conversation and exchange of expertise. And with that being said, I would like to thank all who were here. Maybe if there are some very brief comments that someone might want to make, less under a minute, I would like to open the floor to 1 or 2 comments. But other than that, thank you everybody for all of your inputs. If there are no last comments, then okay, thank you very much again for being here, and hopefully we stay in contact. Thank you for sharing your stories.